What's up, what's up, what's up? We are going to diagnose some AC today. So I've got this beautiful 300zx and it is not keeping me cool. So these are the tools that we're going to use to diagnose what's actually going on with this AC system. The first and most important tool when we're working with AC is our gauge set here. Also have a vacuum pump. If we get to it on this, I'm not sure, we'll find out. We got a stethoscope, see if we can hear any leaks. Also, if we can put a vacuum on the system, see if we can find any leaks that way. I've also got some UV dye. Stuff's really good to help you find the leak. It's got a UV dye in it and it's pressurized. We can put it in the system and hopefully it'll help push out any dye so we can spot the leak with a nice ultraviolet flashlight. But before we can even use any of these tools and diagnose anything, we really need to see what's going on, and you're flying blind without one of these. It's gonna be our most important tool that we're gonna be using today. It's gonna let us know what's going on. This is where you'd want to start if you're diagnosing your AC system as well. All right, so we've got our gauge set here. This is gonna go on your low pressure side, of course, high pressure side over here. A few things going on once we pop the hood and we're looking at our AC system. I'm gonna start doing it. For one, underneath the hood that we have going on here, of course, this is an older Japanese car, 90s JDM tuner car. This car originally had R12. R12 is no longer used. It's illegal to produce and obsolete. So this car also had been retrofitted to R134A. Not all retrofitting procedures are usually taking place. Usually they just throw these connectors on here. That's what will allow us to adapt to this machine, or in a recovery unit is this style adapter over your straighter valve versus what's on the car originally. And they sell these kits at AutoZone. Now all they do is basically it's a connector to adapt to the R12 system, but to properly retrofit from R12 to R134A, the whole system needs to be flushed out. All the O-rings need to be changed. You need to put a new receiver dryer in, probably need a new condenser and a new expansion valve, and then put it all back together. 99% of the time when people retrofit to R134A, they just throw these connectors on, evacuate the system, throw the new stuff in, and hope for the best. And probably 99% of the time it fails because the system wasn't properly adapted. Number two that's going on with this car, my Nissan 300zx, as you can see, on its at least second motor that I know of. And anytime a motor swap was done, of course, the AC has to come out, get disconnected from the engine. 99% of times, disconnected out the lines, pull the engine out. What you should do is disconnect the compressor, leave the compressor in the car, leave the system sealed, pull the engine out itself, but that's a lot more work. It's easier to just pull the compressor with the engine. Most of the time with stuff like this, these older cars, cheaper cars, DIY type cars, they don't get the proper servicing and procedures done when that kind of stuff is done to it. It's usually done for as cheap as possible and as fast as possible, and all that stuff gets done. So the AC system was probably open at one point. Who knows if it was ever recharged? If it was recharged, they probably slapped this on there, threw some stuff together, made it work. But now we're gonna go ahead and diagnose these issues by hooking up our manifold gauge and actually see what's going on. And then these only go on one way. The low pressure line or suction line is going to be the bigger line. This is what's going to actually feed the compressor. And then this smaller line is going to be your high pressure side, and that's going to be the compressor discharge line. That's going to be the line that the AC compressor pressurizes. So on this, you also want to make sure that you're spun all the way out, so you don't trigger the straighter valve once you connect to everything. We'll go ahead and grab the high pressure side. It's gonna have a larger opening there. Our high pressure valve is right there. We'll tug on those, make sure they're good. Usually there's caps on this that we can take off, but this system is missing it. Just another place for it to leak. All right, so that's on there. This is on here. Go ahead and run these down to open up the system. Same on this side. We'll make sure this is open. It is open, and as you can see, Our system, just as I thought, is at 0 pressure. Nothing's going on. There's nothing in the system. That means the system leaked out all the refrigerant. And honestly, the system's just been open for who knows how long, probably years, because I've had this car for about 2 years now and haven't looked at the AC system. Who knows before this? I'm assuming years and years before this. It's probably been a long time since this AC system worked, but now we need to figure out where is the leak in the system. Anywhere this connects needs to have an O-ring connection. If the O-rings are original, they're about 30 years old, they're probably wore out, is go ahead and disconnect our gauge manifold. All right, so it's not great. It's pretty much what I thought. I figured all the refrigerant was gonna be leaked out. Figures probably a leak in the system. I'd say that's pretty common. Let's try and put some UV dye into the system to see if we can even find out where it's leaking at all. All right, so we're gonna check this out. This is an all-in-one system. As you can see, I've already used some of it. This will help us find out any leaks, throw some UV dye in the system, and help pressurize the system to push any dye out. We'll just hook this to the low side because that's always where we want to fill our refrigerant to, is the low side. All right, now when you're using this, you want to get it connected and go ahead and pull on it because you want it to pop off now than when you're putting the UV dye into the system. So we'll go ahead and pull on it. Also, just in case, throw a little towel down there just in case you get any spills. We'll go ahead and shake this up and then we'll apply a little bit. All right, now we can hear something coming out over here. We've got our AC compressor down there. You can hear a little hiss coming down in that area. We have the high pressure line and the low pressure line that feed into the compressor right here. And I hear a little hissing. So that's gonna tell us that something's going on. If we come back and look over here, you can see where some of the UV dye just popped right out. So this fitting's not even tight. The O-ring there's probably no good. So what we need to do, we know we have a leak in the system over here somewhere. We'll have to pull this pipe off. And this is leaking. So what we need to do, since the system is completely empty and obviously we're having trouble with our O-rings, is we need to replace as many O-rings as we can get to, check all the connections. We need to get over here to our AC compressor and find out what's going on over here. Intake tube out of the way. Just removed a couple vacuum lines off of it. It's really pretty simple. It opened this up a ton. Nothing to take that line off there. Disconnected some electrical connectors, the CAS, the TPS, and kind of moved the harness out of the way. It opens up right to the AC compressor. We can see those lines. We'll be able to pop these lines off super easy and service the system. Check out what's going on. This AC line right here runs underneath the front of the car, and there's a connector right, and that O-ring needs to be changed. So we'll get these lines out of the way. We'll actually replace that O-ring down there, this O-ring right here, and then we'll come back here and we need to disconnect and replace these O-rings right here as well. There's our receiver dryer. We will need to rechange the receiver dryer and the O-rings that correspond to that as well, and any connections else I can find once we start replacing O-rings, because the system's empty. We need to replace all the O-rings right now so we can seal an element in there that collects moisture, and obviously the system has had leaks for years, so anything in here is contaminated and it's no good. It needs to be replaced. If we want our AC system to work after we repair it, we need to replace as many of these components as possible. All right, so here's what I pulled off. I went ahead and took those other two lines apart as well that we were leaking from. That's the O-rings that came out of there, and they're so crispy and hard. I mean, they just crumble. You see that just fall apart. There, these are the ones that are off the compressor. So obviously These were not doing anybody any good. The only thing, there you go there. This is what we're gonna be replacing on all those lines. That's what we're gonna be replacing. And then of course we'll have to get a smaller one. I've got a bag of AC O-rings right here. Just grab out the size we need. And we'll need to lube them up before we put it on. I'll just go ahead and use some of my PAG oil to lube up the O-rings before we put them in place. You see that? You like don't even need a flashlight to see this stuff. It's so bright. All right, so I went ahead and put our O-ring back on our high pressure side there. And we've got that one on our low pressure side. Put some UV dye on it, put the O-ring on, kind of wiped everything down because the most important thing about your AC unit is to keep it clean. There's a ton of dirt everywhere in here. It's grimy. I actually went ahead and replaced the O-ring on that unit down there. And I replaced O-ring on this guy over here. We'll actually be replacing these straighter valves as well because they tend to leak. And since the system's empty, we're gonna replace as much stuff as possible. All right, so we've got the system, all the O-rings changed. The only O-rings I haven't changed yet and we will be changing are down underneath with the receiver dryer, because I'm not putting a new receiver dryer in this until I know that everything else is buttoned up and we're ready to actually put refrigerant in the system and be done with it, because I don't want to keep exposing a brand new receiver dryer to atmosphere and humidity, destroying the condensate inside of it. So let's try our UV dye again, see if it comes out, see if it holds pressure, and see if we still hear anything. All right, and we're just gonna add a little bit. And I can still hear something right down here. Put my hand down there. Feel a little bit of something blowing past my fingers. It's on this high pressure line. Let's pull that off and see what is going on, if this line's broken or what's happening. All right, so we've got our high pressure line off, AKA the discharge line. And this is what was leaking right here. This guy, so this is the high pressure relief valve. Something in this system made the high pressure release valve release. I mean, best case scenario, it's just broken. Usually I don't think these just go out for no reason. That something in the system is probably clogged that made this pop and go off. So this is our major leak. Everything else was leaking, but this is what's allowing, we can't even put a vacuum on the system because this is leaking so bad. This is where a bunch of the coolant is discharging from. We need a new one of these to continue on and diagnose the system and see what else is there. But I think we're off to a good start. But we found a huge culprit on why this AC system was empty. So we found bad O-rings, replaced those. Now we found a bad high pressure release valve. But we also have to consider, if we throw that back on, the system holds pressure, we need to know, is there a clog in the system? So we have to think to ourselves, what made that high pressure relief valve release? Now, usually when you do any AC system work, and especially on something like this, where it has no coolant in it, and it had been open to the atmosphere pressure in elements, let's be honest, for years, we want to change as many components as possible. So we're already going to do the receiver dryer, which is right under here. What I would like to do, but we can't do on this because a lot of parts are discontinued, is the AC compressor is discontinued. The condenser is discontinued. We do have the expansion valve that's in the evaporator in the cabin there, which we will be replacing that too, because that could be stuck closed, causing a high pressure buildup that made that valve discharge. If it wasn't the expansion valve, it could be a clog in the condenser that made that valve discharge as well. Hopefully we'll be able to do something about the condenser, because like I said, they're discontinued. But so we're going to order the high pressure relief valve, we are going to order the expansion valve, and then we are going to order a new receiver dryer, replace the O-rings by the new receiver dryer, put that in, We'll also put some new Schrader valves. So that's it for diagnosing. Figured out what the problem was. The problem was the high pressure relief valve. Something's making that go off. So we're gonna order some parts, all the parts that we can to fix that. We'll put them on there. Next time, we'll repair the system and see if that fixes our issue. If not, like literally the only thing you can do about the condenser is order a used one, but who says that the used one's any good? And then the same thing with the compressor, $500–600, and then who says that compressor is any better? So that is unfortunate. That is part of the 300ZX. I'll catch you on the next one. I'm gonna throw up a playlist where we work on this engine because we're getting ready to turbocharge that guy and put it in this engine bay. So check out that playlist over there. And then make sure you check out the second part to diagnosing our AC on the 300ZX. So make sure to hit that subscribe. I'll see you guys over there. Peace. Nice.